All right, Nick, let's talk about the Crimson Tide. They did it. They're in the college football playoff. They have a chance to go and get that national championship. And you hear the news in the media world and everybody kind of just saying, well, this and that, and maybe they didn't deserve it, or did Florida State deserve it? And we can't answer those questions. Only the committee can answer those questions, and they did. And I think they did a pretty good job in doing so. And we have an article today kind of going through some of the highlights that Alabama has had and some of the lowlights Florida State has had, kind of just comparing the two and showing why Alabama definitely should be in the playoff and they are the most deserving to do just that. Let's get into the article. We can talk about it on the other side. This is over on Roll Tide Wire. It says, yes, Florida State went undefeated and beat two SEC schools over the course of 13 games. FSU still did not have a better resume than Alabama. The Seminoles opened the season with a win over an LSU team with an inflated preseason ranking of number 5, and a Florida team without Graham Mertz that finished the season 5-7. FSU's strength of schedule ranked 55th in the nation, well behind Michigan, 33rd, well behind Washington, 11th, well behind Texas at 13th, and well behind Alabama, who was 5th at strength of schedule. Even Ohio State had 7th strength schedule, and Georgia had the 37th strength of schedule. Collectively, FSU's opponents went 77-79 this season, while Alabama's opponents went 98-61. Alabama played only 3 teams that finished the year with a losing record. The Seminoles had 3 wins over teams in the final college football playoff top 25, those being LSU, Clemson, and Louisville. Alabama had 4, including one over the consensus number 1 all season, that being, of course, Georgia, who was consensus number 1 pretty much the entire football season. So I think if you look at the stats, if you look at how things stack up, it is clear that Alabama, through every facet of this game, outside of record, which I think we throw out the window at this point when you stack everything up, they definitely deserve to be here. Nick, I'm curious what your thoughts are, but Alabama fans, now's the time to celebrate. Let us know in the comments below. Did you think Alabama was going to get in? How excited are you? And what do you think they're going to do against Michigan? Let us know in the comments below. But Nick, what are your thoughts on Alabama making it in the college football playoff? And what are your thoughts on Florida State?
Yeah, so the committee, they made it 100% correct. I think it's undeniable. I think if you told me what the 4 best teams were in college football after everything shaked out over conference championship weekend, I would go Michigan, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia would be my number 4. I don't think Washington. I think they're a little bit of a fraud, but we'll see what happens when it comes to the actual playoff. Those are my 4 best teams in college football. Obviously, Georgia wasn't going to get in, how that game turned out and how everything else turned out, but I honestly felt those were the 4 best teams. And I think it was pretty obvious. And look, I think the clear thing to focus on, you brought up the LSU comp. I think that's the most interesting comparison between the 2 programs, because Alabama obviously played LSU. Florida State played LSU. Florida State put a 40-burger on Alabama, on LSU, won by 2 scores. I think 2 or 3 scores, something like that. It was a blowout. Alabama put a 40-burger up on LSU and won by 2 scores as well. So that was with Florida State having Jordan Travis. So at their absolute peaks, when healthy against a similar opponent, the results were about the same. Then you lose Jordan Travis from Florida State, and we saw the massive drop-off. It's clear they're not nearly as good. The reality is, if they did not have Jordan Travis throughout the entire regular season, Florida State probably wins 8 games. The committee looked at that, and that's what they came up with, and I agree, it's 100%. Now, you can sit there and say that's not fair, that's mean, they're undefeated conference champ, but look, be an adult here. I don't care what you say on Twitter or X or whatever the heck it's called these days. I don't care what people say on ESPN or whatever. The reality is, everyone who watched any football over this weekend walked away with the feeling that Florida State did not belong in the college football playoff. They were not one of the top 4 teams in the country. How they played against Louisville. Defensively, sure, they've got a great defense. But if you look at their offense, not even remotely close due to their quarterback situation. That's reality. When it comes time to making tough decisions like the committee has to do, you got to be a grown-up about it, right? None of this whining, none of this immaturity I see all over social media and stuff and say, well, they were undefeated conference champ. Big whoop. It happens all the time. The Auburn Tigers, after the 2004 season, were left out of the BCS title game despite being undefeated SEC champs. It happens. There are times it just happens, and that was when Auburn actually had a healthy starting quarterback. Jason Campbell was her starting quarterback. He was healthy. Completely different situation in Auburn. An SEC team was left out of the BCS title game. Similar situation here, and Florida State was without their quarterback. I think it is a no-brainer move by the committee. And you brought up all the fact that Alabama had a better resume on paper. I think that's undeniable. And I think this is what we're really seeing. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I think we're just seeing a lot of SEC. I think there's two things we're seeing, to be honest. One, I think we're seeing a lot of SEC hating from anyone who doesn't follow the SEC football. I think that's exactly what this is, because everyone gets tired of hearing about how great the SEC is. And look, they are. They win it pretty much every year, except for, Clemson taking one every now and then. In the college football playoff, Ohio State, of course, had that miracle run a number of years ago. But outside of that, it's 100% SEC dominance. I think a lot of people are tired of it, so they're looking for anything they possibly could to keep the SEC out of the college football playoff. But here, I think, is the big story. And I think this is what you're hearing from Michigan folks, from Pac-12 folks, right? From Texas folks. They're scared to death of Alabama, and rightly so. They went and played Georgia and physically dominated the number one team in the country. Team had won, I believe, 29 straight games, two-time defending champions, undefeated through SEC play. I mean, Georgia did absolutely dominant the entire season, minus a few hiccups here and there. Clearly the number one team in college football, and Alabama absolutely physically dominated them. That's terrifying for the other three teams in the college football playoff. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of people upset, because I think a lot of people were hoping, a lot of Michigan fans hoping they get to play Florida State, a lot of Texas fans hoping maybe they'll get to play Florida State, right? A lot of Washington fans scared to death of the Tide, right? That's just the reality. And look, I'm not a Crimson Tide fan, right? You look at our channel, we cover pretty much all of college football. But the reality is there is no team in America as physically dominant and playing as well as Alabama is right now. And I think that's exactly why you see a lot of people really concerned the fact that they got into the playoff.
Yeah, Nick, and you watch the reveal shows, you see them tune into Michigan when they show, okay, here's number 5. Okay, that's not going to be who we play. Who we're going to play, and the number 4 team is Alabama, and you hear everyone in the audience go, "Oh!" Your heart sinks. Your nuts go in your stomach. You're just kind of like, "Wow, kind of got to play Alabama now. That's not where we wanted to be." They would probably, I bet you, Michigan would rather play Washington, they would rather play Texas, they would rather play any other team in the college football playoff than Alabama at this point in time. And that's the thing, Nick. Alabama, they had a messed up at the beginning of the season. And I think that's what makes it so impressive is Alabama and Nick Saban in particular. He's done a heck of a coaching job. He turned this team around. They got the offensive line back on track. They got the quarterback back on track. They powered through this entire season and came in the coup d'etat at the end of the season is them being SEC champs, beating the absolute hardest team that they could face in number 1 ranked Georgia, and then just doing it in a dominant fashion. I think Alabama absolutely deserves to be here, and I think anyone in the college football playoff will tell you this was the only team they did not want to play. And you listen to the committee, they talk about it. They went through scenarios 8 to 12 times. They said, we talked about who are the teams that we wouldn't want to play. Alabama obviously consistently came up. And on top of that, the committee also said they do take into account who isn't there, whether it is a coach or a player. They take those things into account. Yes, Florida State had a very good quarterback, but he is no longer there. So I think everything considered, Alabama absolutely deserve here. There's a picture on the screen right now of Nick Saban and one of his players. They're holding a news clipping up from the SEC Championship. It says Bama's back, and I think they're here to stay.